What I've been able to learn in the last couple of years is if you start focusing on the relationships between big pharma and the media, or big pharma and the government, just by focusing on that, you can really create clear narratives of corruption, hypocrisy, dishonesty. Those things are there. But me, because my background is not a journalist, is not a conventional education, I'm sort of open to the more extraordinary, exciting, visceral ideas, which once in a while prove to be true, like the example of Epstein Island. But then you become kind of porous, and you're like, oh yeah, no, tell me all of this stuff.
Right, and then it's hard to sort out the wheat from the chaff.
A little bit, isn't it? And also your credibility suffers, and it's like, you've obviously managed to sort of follow, pursue this path, saying, like, I'm a comedian, I'm not got an obligation, I'm not a journalist, I'm open to everybody. Yeah. But it seems like as the cultural role changes, as the power and magnetism, because of the needs, because of the necessity, because people just aren't, like you say, the loss of trust in institutions, the loss of trust in authority, being open and willing to have those conversations grants you all power, and then the commercial power comes and the financial power comes, and suddenly you've got to navigate it. And I think it all came together in that, it seemed, at least from the perspective of an observer, in the ivermectin moment, that the culture should be able to tolerate a conversation. The culture, that shouldn't be verboten.
Well, not just that, but the blatant lies that CNN was telling about it. When you had CNN and MSNBC and all these different cable news network shows calling it horse dewormer, when it was a drug that won the Nobel Prize for the inventor of it, is a drug that has had billions, literally billions of prescriptions filled. It's a drug that saved lives, a drug that's on the World Health Organization's list of essential medicines. And for them to have the gall and to have the sheer audacity to just out and out lie to people about what a medication is. And it's used on humans far more than it's used on horses. And that they were calling that horse dewormer to try to mock me because they knew that I was unvaccinated and I kicked COVID very quickly. And they did not want that narrative out there. And they were beholden to their handlers. They were beholden to the people that give them exorbitant amounts of money in advertising revenue. And they fucking followed in line, and they all piled on, and they lost a fuckload of credibility from it. I mean, if you look at the way people who saw that, how many people saw that and would go, oh my God, they're just lying. Yeah. They're just lying. Like, there's no excuse for that. You can't imagine a scenario where they really thought I was taking horse medication. You can't imagine a scenario where they thought that I couldn't get real people medication. You can't imagine it. I'm not poor. I'm not without resources. I'm not confused. I'm not without the recommendations of actual physicians. Like, none of that makes any sense. The idea that they could go on television and say, oh, this conspiracy theorist is taking horse dewormer. And that was the narrative, not, hey, how'd that guy get better so quick? Yeah. How is it 3 days after he got COVID, we shut the whole country down for this thing, and he looks fine? And then they changed my filter and turned me yellow on television. Like, they took the original video of me and ran it through a filter to make me look horrible. It's really, they did some wild shit. But that wild shit that they did cost them their credibility. I just don't think they understood the landscape when they were doing that.
They took an extreme editorial perspective without realizing that's what they were doing. And I think that the entire mainstream culture has actually found itself on a kind of a peninsula, that where there is insignificant variety, in my view, between the two parties, which is why they're so willing to remain engaged in cultural war discourse and the conventional hot button topics in this country in particular around the pro-life, pro-choice and guns arguments. They're willing to remain in that territory because financially and economically they are ultimately aligned, that the most powerful interests in America are happy with either outcome. I think that what's happened in the media space is they've unwittingly found themselves in a place where there's a kind of that incompetence was afforded, that they're not used to being challenged, that the assumption was that you would be sunk by that narrative, that it was an insignificant new space. And obviously it was a massive miscalculation because they weren't watching what was happening. They weren't listening to the the conversations with McCulloch and Malone and Weinstein, and that it is apolitical, and that also that in order to make themselves seem distinct from one another, they have amplified their small differences to the point where they don't recognise actually that isn't America anymore.